Once you've been across this once and the first layer of white is dry, it's a good idea to repaint the areas that catch most of the light. We mustn't forget to include some strong front light on his feet. We're now at the stage where we can apply all our final detail. Firstly though, I'm going to put one final glaze over the whites and darks of this bird just to calm everything down. I'm using to glaze over the light areas some yellow ochre, and I'll simply glaze some burnt sienna over the wings and the darker areas. We'll leave that to dry and then we can start to work on our details. We will start with the eye. I'm going to add a little highlight into the eyelid underneath the eye, just through there. It'll just lift that. And while I've got my white, I'm going to strengthen the highlight around that part of the nostril and across the top of the bill, and in this part of the bill here that is catching the strongest light. However, before that dries, again I must just clean my brush and make sure that hard edge is removed. Now for the eye itself. The first thing we must do is to define the shadow that runs around the eye lid. And this will crisp up our drawing. So again, a fine brush that comes to a good point is essential. We'll continue that fine detailing while that's dry, just by strengthening our outlines and our shadows just in that area of the bill. I'm going to take a larger brush now and just define some of the shapes and markings that are softly in this head. These are not the hard markings, sharp markings that are on the wings that we've done, but these are softer greys that are characteristic of male kestrels, and they will just darken going down there. And we need to consider the one that comes down almost like a tear mark from the eye, and that will come down in that direction, pointing up towards the bill. There is also a brow over the eye which will cast a very important shadow over the upper part of the eyelid, and it'll just tone that down and push that into shadow. And the detail of those feathers curving round from the brow down through the darker markings on the face will give that a little bit more of a defined structure. So just follow the reference photograph quite carefully. And then taking our small brush, we can just strengthen some of the shadows in this area and the lines that come up there between the eyes. Up to there. We can also just, I notice there's some darker marks underneath the bill that come down like that, and we can just block those in. The eye is now looking more recessed under the shadow of the brow. While that's drying, I'm going to paint the highlight on the eye. There's a little highlight that is worth putting in, and it's a very soft white highlight that just reflects back on the underside of an eye. The eye on this bird is black, and black is highly reflective when it's got a shiny layer, and the wet dome lens on the eye will make this very reflective, and even something like the snow or a white light feathers underneath will reflect back up into there and just lighten that little area slightly. But the main highlight is a reflection of the sky, and it doesn't need to be too light, just some ultramarine blue and some titanium white, and we can paint that practically over the top half of that eye. Perhaps you could lift the colour a little bit, but it doesn't want to be too bright. Okay, and perhaps as well, I'm just going to use some dark just to sharpen that edge up. And one final detail with a fine brush you can just put in this is with some white, not to put the catch light, that little white spot necessarily, because in this case the sun is to the right and behind the kestrel, but the horizon is going to be lighter at the base of that reflection. We'll now use some opaque yellow ochre, lightened with white, to paint in our feathers now that come away from this bird, down from here, and just paint them into the dark feathers and just use them to lighten up these feathers that come away in this direction from underneath the bill. So having defined them, we ought really just to put some white in them again, just to lighten that down. There. And we'll put some thicker, more opaque white in there, just to strengthen that light. So bit by bit, we're building up a feeling for these soft, creamy feathers that start to come down the front of the bird. Again, they will also be needed on the top here, and we can paint into the dark, paint light on dark, and just bring these with the tip of a very fine brush. Just use that to bring these feather shapes out.